In 2017, I was part of a program called the Intergenerational Learning Specialist Program. It was formulated out of the challenge to teach the most gifted children in our population. How is a teacher going to teach a young person who is smarter than them? What they found after tackling this challenge was that the only way that you can reach a child who is smarter than the system is you make their learning process about themselves. Your life is the only textbook that you need, period. And so the program that I was a part of, facilitated by Derek Fenner and Candace Antique Davis, was going to take this approach to teaching into juvenile halls with a research project. And so we had to think of a question, and I happened to be working both in Alameda County as well as Marin County, and I was able to apply this project in both environments. And the result of it opened up so many other lanes of how we can find access points for people going through all different types of stuff. So that's what this presentation is about. So let me see if this will work. Okay, so the question was, why is it important for young people in the juvenile justice system to engage in dialogue around liberation, the word liberation, and generate text in response? 7 different classes at Alameda and Marin County. And these were the questions that I asked them with this idea of their answers are the study material. So the questions were, what does liberation mean to you? What keeps you from liberation? What is a code? How are codes related to liberation? And then what is your code for liberation? This was the scaffolding of the questions that I would bring each week that we would build upon. I would start off a class, we'd play a game of hangman. I didn't call it hangman, but basically like gamify the lesson to start off with by having them guess the word on the board, which was liberation, and then going into their questions about what does that mean? Have you ever heard of that word before? What does it mean for you? Pretty much getting to the conclusion that it's a fancy word for freedom. These are the answers that they came up with: freedom from limitation, freedom from incarceration, institutionalization, confinement, handcuffs, not having a voice, dependence, physical versus mental freedom, right? Emotional freedom, financial freedom, spiritual freedom. And their answers came down to liberty and justice. And then we asked the question, what keeps you from liberation? Their answers were around choices and mentality, right? Emotions, ideology, ignorance, lack of motivation, stubbornness, easy money, disobedience, peer pressure, numbness, comfort, influences, all things that have to do with mentality are keeping these kids from liberation. Also things in their environment, their family, siblings, parents, relationships, love and abuse, peers, neighborhood, racism, society, social norms around sexuality, gender, being a woman, and then the justice system, specifically crime, jail, police, probation, warrants, judgment, institutionalization, CPS, law, surveillance, then things around addiction, drug, sex, alcohol, technology, money, habits, lack of resources, around knowledge, around money, around guidance, around housing, around work, and then lastly, violence and abuse, guns, trauma, fear, rape and abuse, altercations, and just survival. So this word right here, this word code, speaks to everyone if we break it down in the right way, and it speaks to pretty much our entire experience as human beings. But I asked them, what is a code? Where have you heard this word? What does it mean to you? And we broke it down into 3 categories, right? On one hand, a code represents rules of conduct. It's a set of agreements to provide order or law, right? Such as the penal code or the street code, right? Also too, it's language. It's words that you live by. It's something to follow. It's what you stand for, your source of ambition, a belief system, principles. This is talking about the moral aspect of it. And then lastly is access, right? Something that gives you access to something, whether it's a passcode, a secret language or a secret code, something for accessing understanding, knowledge, security, and privacy. You'll also see another definition, which I think is very germane to the conversation, and that is programming instructions. So how are codes related to this idea of liberation? Well, they help you survive. They give you access. They keep you in check. And they keep people organized. They can help you make better choices. And knowing the code can help you not get misled, but not knowing or breaking codes ultimately will lead to consequences. The question then was, are all codes related to liberation? I'll come back to that question, but this was the next question I asked them, what is your code for liberation? If we know that a code is a set of ideas that help guide you, what are some of your codes? Do you have a personal code that you go by? So some of the answers: to take care of and know yourself, respect yourself and those who respect you, be aware of who to trust, think about your choices, mind your own business, and remain loyal to those loyal to you. If you really distill the meaning of your life into language, then there's other codes that you can apply to that language to now bring in that energy that the idea is packaged in. And so another form of a code, and we were talking about hip hop, is a rhyme code. Focusing on just the rhyming code, I showed them how to basically take their liberation codes and find where the rhyme will be and then create based off of that. Those are some of the things that they came up with. Be mindful of the choices you make. Be careful of the advice that you take. Shake off the pain that makes you hate. Stay cautious of the lies that are fake. Remaining loyal, always remain loyal. Loyalty is like nutrients in the soil. Fake friends might be digging for oil. You don't want your sacred ground to become spoiled. Bars. The last one, be aware of who to trust. Mama always said, be aware of who to trust, because it's some two-faced friends chilling in the cuts. Know the difference between what's love and what's lust. Blocks and police hand better freeze before they bust. So this was really kind of reaffirming this idea that our kids that oftentimes are thrown away or looked down upon as not able to be successful in a learning environment, these kids are gifted. As long as they can find the truth within themselves and the honesty and feel comfortable in sharing that, there's so much that we can do with that. The data from this research proved more informative than originally anticipated. Out of the dialogue around liberation emerged the concept of the code, which can be understood on both sides of the law, determining who enjoys freedom and who does not. The street code exists for the survival of those who cannot rely on the legal code for safety and protection. A code can be understood in this way as a tool for gaining security and access on a physical, mental, and social level. And then we talked about something that we use every day, and that is our language. The words that we use, our communication. We are constantly using codes, whether we're aware of it or not, and understanding that every code is a type of language, even if it's made up of numbers. But more importantly, every language can be used as a code. It's actually a complex code because it can contain other codes within it that can be used to both reveal information and conceal information. And I think this is where this kind of drives the point home around oppression versus liberation. Because one thing that came up was this idea of a secret code. The secret code is designed for concealing information, right? The purpose of it is to give access to a minority group by concealing information from the majority. The more people that understand a secret code, the less power it has. The purpose of the sacred code is to universally enhance understanding through the learning and sharing of its information. And conversely, as more people understand sacred codes, the stronger they become. An example of this would be something like music or like the language of your culture, right? You go to another country, they're speaking a different language. They might as well be speaking in code, but you can learn that language and it will enhance your experience. These are things that are kind of universal, right? The more people know them, the better off we all are, as opposed to secret codes, which rely on the opposite. So taking this idea and looking at, okay, our sacred codes are liberatory language. If we remain focused on this type of language, then our chances for survival go way up and our chances for freedom go way up. Because sacred codes, when shared, reveal further information, they can be used to enhance one's personal understanding of self and reality. And I really like, Dr. Travis, your scaffolding of starting with the self-esteem and then how it builds up into larger and larger circles of change. We hear these things all the time, but we kind of like, yeah, and the truth will set you free. Yeah, we all know that. But this is really deep stuff, right? That's a powerful code. And understanding secret codes as oppressive language, right? They automatically create a power dynamic by giving an advantage to those who have its knowledge. Because of that, they reinforce oppressive dynamics because they ensure that not everyone is afforded the same access to knowledge. And also secret codes are used to protect those who are surviving in an oppressive society. So this was sort of a distilling of this conversation that a secret code cannot be a sacred code and a sacred code cannot be a secret code. Literacy reveals certain secret codes can be embedded in seemingly sacred language. I'll use an example for this on the next slide, but to understand this, and I feel like this speaks to the problem that all of us in the United States are faced with, is that we get told this narrative about our environment from the time we are born. And this reality that we're told, that we're taught, whether it's from our parents or whether it's from our school, is ultimately pre-coded. It's been pre-coded through the systems that have been in place for hundreds of years. And because we're not necessarily aware of it, or we assume that that's just the reality, that's the way it is, and we don't have any alternative examples, we're just kind of bred to assume these things as fact or as true when there's information that we're not shown that keep us from really understanding how this language gets applied. So to drive this point home, right, I use this in example one of the classes, the preamble to the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? This is the code of our country. And it sounds really good. At first glance, this might look like a sacred code, like everybody can get down with this. But when we really start to ask some critical literacy questions, we find that even this language has deeper meaning in it that you have to really apply to your reality to see if they line up. So we hold these truths to be self-evident. Who is the we, right? Who is that? And when you get down to that, well, who are our founding fathers? Property owning Caucasian men, right? That's one clue. Who does the phrase all men apply to? Does it apply to all men? Does it apply to those of African descent? Does it apply to those who don't have property, right? When you do your research, you know that it's property owning men. Who does the phrase all men not apply to? Well, women, right? This is clear language. So then ultimately, who is the Declaration of Independence really intended for? White male property owners. Would the Declaration of Independence have applied to you if you were alive at that time? These are the type of critical literacy things that, now you can see like, wait a second, this is almost like we're being taught this to be a universal truth, but it really isn't. So how do we fight these oppressive codes? One, if we're not even aware of them, that's part of the effectiveness of a secret code, is that if the code is strong enough and it's a secret code, chances are you have no idea that it exists. So how do we fight that? The conclusion I came up with was identifying your personal code is what can protect an individual against these unidentified pre-existing codes, which may be oppressive. So this idea of that we are all capable of creating our own code that applies to us in our experience, as unique as that is, because if we don't have that, if we're not in touch with that, then we're living by somebody else's code, quite literally, and that code may not have been designed for our survival. So when you have a personal code, what it allows you to do is make your choices intentionally in your environment. If you know that you want to get from point A to point Z, and you know that it's a matter of choices and time and opportunity for you to get to that place, well, then you can make your choices intentionally and ask yourself, well, does this choice I'm about to make right now take me closer to that point Z, or is it going to keep me in the same spot, or is it going to take me back? And just having that awareness in your mind is how you can navigate your environment so that it starts to reflect the goal that you are trying to get for yourself. In conclusion, kind of following a personal code reveals information that can liberate a person from these other codes that would otherwise suppress our fuller understanding of ourselves and of our reality. And, I muse a little bit further on that. The thing that I'm taking forward with it is I'm trying to understand how secret codes and sacred codes show up in my own life and be very conscious about the choices that I make in relation to that and knowing why. We still have to be strategic and tactical about our choices. So that was my presentation. I'll just open it up. Anybody have any questions, thoughts, reflections?
That last part, the sacred versus secret, I thought was incredibly intriguing because one of the things with hip hop's kind of move into the mainstream it often felt like what was, to use your term, like a secret code among our culture was something that was kind of broken open and taken advantage of and exploited. But this idea of a sacred code, it's almost like there's a way to, these conversations we're having, there's a way to reclaim it as a sacred code. There's nothing to hide anymore, but embrace the essence of the culture and all of the ways that it's empowering for us individually and collectively. You know, we could use that flip, you know what I mean? And so that's kind of what came to mind as you were going through that. Thanks for sharing that.